Over the decades, there have been numerous changes to how the NBA salary cap works. Everything from contract clauses to little tricks and exploits that some teams took advantage of. The NBA is constantly updating the playbook and how free agency works. Usually, it only takes one player in a weird situation to cause the NBA to rethink their contract rules, especially since they need to set a precedent for how future transactions are handled. In this video, I want to take a look at how certain players forced the NBA to make new rules that changed the landscape of the league. In particular, Gilbert Arenas, Kevin Durant, and Jeremy Lin. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and let's get into it. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. If you like the content, drop a sub or a like, and thank you so much for the support. The Gilbert Arenas rule. Let's go back in time. It's the 2003 offseason. All the major headlines were centered around, the Lakers, as usual. Kobe just got accused of sexual assault, the feud with Shaq reached an all-time high, the Lakers signed Karl Malone and Gary Payton. Other headlines included LeBron James getting drafted to Cleveland, and the prominent '03 class was all the rage. Also, Michael Jordan just retired for the third and final time. However, lost in all this noise was a low-key, very important, but very weird situation involving Gilbert Arenas. By 2003, Arenas had just played 2 seasons with the Golden State Warriors, the team that drafted him. He was quickly rising up the ranks, becoming one of the best young players in the entire NBA. He was even named the NBA's most improved player in his sophomore season. The Warriors obviously really wanted to keep him. So after his 2-year contract expired, they whipped out the checkbook and was ready to re-sign him. But just one problem. He was a second-round pick. Now, you might be wondering, why does that even matter? Well, back then, if a player was coming off a rookie-scale contract, teams were allowed to go over the salary cap to re-sign them. Except, rookie-scale contracts only applied to first-round picks, not second-round picks. When Arenas first entered the league in 2001, he signed a normal 2-year contract. So by the 2003 offseason, he became a restricted free agent, and he could take offers from other teams. So the Wizards swooped in and offered him a hefty 6-year, $60 million deal. The Warriors could not match that offer since they didn't have enough cap space, and they could not go over it because they don't have his bird rights, because he's only been in the league for 2 seasons. The most money the Warriors could offer him was $4.9 million per year, which, of course, was not enough. They lost Arenas, their young rising star, for nothing. The NBA saw this and did not want something like this to happen again, so in 2005, they created what is now known as the Gilbert Arenas rule. This is what it stated. The Arenas provision limits the first-year salary that teams can offer restricted free agents who have only been in the league for 1 or 2 years. The starting salary for an offer sheet can't exceed the amount of the mid-level exception, which allows the player's original team to use its MLE to match it. Otherwise, a team without the necessary cap space or exceptions would be powerless to keep its player, like the Warriors were with Arenas. The application of the Arenas provision is infrequent since first and second-year players who reach free agency rarely warrant such lucrative contract offers. First-round picks sign 4-year rookie deals when they enter the NBA, so the Arenas provision generally applies to second-round picks or undrafted free agents, whose first NBA contracts were only for 1 or 2 years. This basically means that restricted free agents who only played for 1 or 2 years are limited to how much they could make, so their team could keep them, just so this situation could never happen again. The funny thing is, Arenas fared much better as a second-round pick, because he was quickly able to sign a massive contract, while first-rounders were still stuck on their rookie-scale contract for up to 4 years. For example, Pau Gasol, the 3rd pick of the 2001 draft, was making far less money in his 3rd and 4th year, while Arenas' $60 million deal already kicked in. Maybe this was Gilbert's plan all along, to fall down the draft board into the 2nd round. Anyway, this rule came into play for Tyler Johnson's free agency in 2016. Johnson, an undrafted player who joined the Heat 2 years prior, became a restricted free agent. The Nets tried to pry him away from the Heat by offering him 4 years, $50 million. The Heat did not have the cap space, but by using the arenas provision, they were able to match that offer and keep Tyler Johnson. Not only that, but this rule changed the way teams handled undrafted players or second-round picks. Nikola Jokic was a good example of that. The Nuggets felt like he might be really good, so they didn't want to offer him just a 2-year deal. They signed him to a 4-year deal when he first came in, and after he played there for 3 seasons, they were able to offer him a maximum extension. 5 years, $148 million. Just imagine if there was no arenas provision, and if the Nuggets only signed him for 2 years, and some other team snatched him away afterwards. That would be insane. You'd essentially lose a superstar for nothing, just cause he was a second-round pick. I'm glad this rule was implemented. The Kevin Durant Supermax Rule. With Kevin Durant's departure to Golden State in the 2016 offseason, and overall with so many superstars teaming up on other teams, the NBA wanted to clamp down on this super team era. Their response was to create a new Supermax contract. This Supermax would pay the player 35% of the team's salary cap, plus 8% more each year. Players can only receive a Supermax if they're entering their 8th or 9th season in the NBA, and they're only eligible if they're still with the team that drafted them, or the team that acquired them in a trade at any point during their rookie contract. The qualifications, though, are quite tough. The player must make multiple All-NBA teams or win multiple Defensive Player of the Years, or win MVP. They need to fill at least one of these 3 criteria to be eligible for the Supermax. The purpose of the Supermax was to give an advantage to small market teams to keep their homegrown superstar, as they can offer them the most money. The NBA wanted their star players to stick with their original teams instead of going around forming super teams. It was supposed to make the NBA more competitive, in theory, but in reality, it hasn't worked out at all. Shortly after it was implemented, 2 homegrown superstars, Kawhi Leonard and Anthony Davis, were going to be eligible for the Supermax with the Spurs and Pelicans, respectively. But instead, they didn't care about that. The extra money wasn't going to sway them to stay. So they sat on the bench and forced a trade to another team. So this whole incentive of the Supermax, it didn't do anything. But there's another issue, and that issue pertains to stars who are great players, but they would not be worth the Supermax anyway. An article from Sports Illustrated put it nicely. What's interesting about the Supermax era is that these deals almost always end with handicaps that make life more difficult for everyone involved. Teams are forced to spend huge amounts of money on stars who are unlikely to reward the investment with proportional production on the court, while players who sign the deals are suddenly marooned on teams that don't have the money or flexibility to pay for contender-quality sidekicks. Because really, who are we kidding? If Kemba signed a huge deal to stay in Charlotte, it would be clear on the day he signed the deal that he would probably never have enough help to win a championship. Now, Kemba is a good example of a star who, he was great in his prime, but there's no way the Hornets would give him the Supermax anyway. Same with Jimmy Butler, that's why the Bulls traded him. Even if he demanded the Supermax, they wouldn't give it to him. DeMarcus Cousins really wanted the Supermax, but the Kings did not give it to him. Probably the only smart choice the Kings made during that time period. This attempt by the NBA to make the league more competitive and balanced has actually created more problems. And we've seen even more stars leave their teams, as many of them believe they deserve way more money than what they're worth, and when they don't get that money, they feel slighted. Perhaps the NBA needs to give more incentives for teams to offer the Supermax. Maybe decrease the luxury tax on those contracts. Heck, maybe even allow homegrown stars to earn more than 35% of the cap, but simultaneously reduce the hit on the cap for the team. This overall is a good concept to keep stars on separate teams, but it hasn't worked well in practice. There needs to be another discussion during the next collective bargaining agreement on how to make Supermaxes more appealing for both the players and teams. Cause right now, it's a mess. Jeremy Lin's poison pill contract. Remember that fantastic few weeks in 2012? Linsanity took the world by storm, and for a while, he was the most talked about player in the entire country. But do you also remember what happened during that offseason, when the Knicks tried to re-sign him? Well, the Rockets came swooping in with a 3-year, $25 million deal. Seems reasonable at first, but then looking at the details closer, they spiked the last year of that contract. For the first 2 years, he'd be paid $5 million, then for the third year, $15 million. That $15 million in that third year would be devastating for the Knicks' luxury tax. But for the Rockets, they had the option to spread out his salary to a consistent $8.3 million a year. The Rockets gave the same offer to Omer Asik to snatch him from the Bulls. It worked. Both the Knicks and the Bulls were unwilling to get hit with a massive luxury bill in the third year of their deals, so they let them go. A few years later, the NBA made a new rule that forbids something like this from happening again. They allowed the team who currently has the player to spread out his salary as well, just like the Rockets did. This was an exploit that Daryl Morey took advantage of, along with other teams as well. But the Lin situation was by far the most noteworthy one, because that's the main reason the Knicks had to let him go. The Knicks' payroll was massive at that point, so that luxury tax in Lin's third year of his deal, that would have been huge. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were 3 rule changes that shaped the free agency landscape in modern NBA history. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.